What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here. In this video, I wanted to discuss what has quickly become one of my favorite weapons to use this season. We will be taking a look at the rapid fire frame pulse rifle from the Prophecy Dungeon, the Darkest Before. So over this past week, I played a lot of Iron Banner. I used to actually be in a PvP clan way back when, but since the game has evolved, I turned more to the PvE side of the game. But I always enjoy going back for Iron Banner every season as a way to test out some new weapons against other Guardians. And this past week, I absolutely fell in love with this pulse rifle. So first, let's take a look at my role. It has surplus and elemental capacitor with a stability masterwork. So to say this thing is a laser beam is an understatement. For mag options, it has light mag or flared magwell, and for barrel options, it has fluted barrel and chambered compensator. So I would not say this is a god roll, as I will go into what I think the god roll is later, but this thing is super consistent. It is one of the most stable pulse rifles I've ever used in an archetype that is usually rather unstable. I have a Horror's Lease that I used to love because it had full auto and high caliber rounds, so it was great for dueling. But this thing is far more consistent than it ever was. If you don't know what surplus does, basically it improves your stats for every charged ability. Now first off, I don't usually love surplus, especially on things like shotguns, because it makes the weapon inconsistent. Your handling speed is a big deal for pulling out a shotgun and aiming down sights, and I don't like that to feel different from engagement to engagement. I have an Astral Horizon that had quick draw and opening shot, but I hated it after it was changed to surplus because it threw off my muscle memory. However, surplus on this thing is actually amazing. If you are out of abilities, it has high enough intrinsic stats that you don't notice that change too much. And elemental capacitor on an arc class basically maxes out its handling anyways. So the only place you would really notice surplus lacking if your abilities were used up is on your stability and reload speed. And those things you can correct. You can reload and cover, and you can just focus up a bit more to hit your shots due to lack of stability. And my role in particular is already incredibly stable. At 67 stability, that is quite high for a rapid frame pulse. So basically what I am saying is if you don't like surplus because you spam abilities like me, give it a chance on this weapon, because it is far less noticeable than it is on an aggressive shotgun with low handling. You can easily work around it. And when surplus is fully charged, or even 2 out of 3, the results are amazing. The gun feels incredible to shoot. I have always loved rapid fire frames because they are great at dueling. But they did always have quite a bit of kick to them. With surplus, it takes that hard to control element away. And if we look in the perk column for the left slot, I don't see any better option as it is. Tunnel vision is only good after a kill, overflow is nice but not necessary in PvP, slide shot is a good option for sure, but not as nice as surplus in my opinion, and really only good if you slide a lot. Subsistence is definitely more of a PvE perk, and quick draw was nerfed, and surplus can basically give you the old quick draw feel if you have your abilities up. So for PvP, I think it is the best option. And then we look at the column to the right. I loved full auto on my Horror's Lease back when I played console, but now that I am MNK, I don't find it nearly as useful. So if you're on controller and like full auto, then that could be a good option here. I love full auto on sidearms for instance, but I was totally fine not having it on this pulse and felt I'd probably hit my shots better without it. One for All is purely a PvE perk. Unrelenting is too inconsistent in my experience, but not a bad option if all the other perks are right. Wellspring is also mostly for PvE I think, unless you are using an ability based build in PvP. And Rampage is nice for sure, but again, like Tunnel Vision, it requires a kill. I love damage perks in PvP, don't get me wrong. One-shotting with Sturm back in the day, Desperado sprees on the Messenger, those are super fun. But this gun has the chance to be the most consistent weapon in your arsenal, and for that, I think you need to go with Elemental Capacitor. It is not great on solar subclasses, as that gives a bump to reload speed, so it is kind of useless, but I used it in Iron Banner on the other 3 subclasses this past week, and my god it felt good. I mostly used it on Arc, and it was incredibly snappy, but that stability you get from Void is super nice too. And it even felt very nice to use on Stasis. I was super impressed with this perk overall, and it offsets the negatives of being out of abilities with surplus. If I was out of abilities on Arc, it was still super snappy because it gives plus 45 to handling, plus my roll has fluted barrel. But when surplus was fully charged, it felt even better. Basically, at base, this gun is super nice, and you throw on elemental capacitor and surplus, and it turns it into the nicest feeling pulse in the game in my opinion. So now, what is the god roll? For that, I would take small bore or hammerforge rifling to increase your range or range and stability. Small bore would probably be the play, as overall you are getting more bang for your buck, and hammerforge will only get you another half meter of range over small bore. And in the next column, 100% you want high caliber rounds. These weapons pump out a lot of lead very quickly, and high cal will flinch your opponents like crazy, and it adds +5 to range. The next best option would be ricochet rounds for the increase to range and stability, but high cal is definitely your friend here. And then I would take a range masterwork over a stability masterwork. We'll go over optimum ranges in just a second, but the greater range you can get, the better. And surplus and elemental capacitor will add to the stability to offset what you lose for not having stability increasing perks. The more range on this weapon, the better. It duels amazingly well in the mid-range, and actually has an optimal TTK of 0.8 seconds at 7 crits and 2 bodies. And let me tell you, that is shockingly easy to achieve. I am not a great aimer at all, so I think that is why I love this archetype. It is forgiving while also being deadly. Its TTK is faster than a 140 RPM hand cannon, which has a 0.87 second time to kill, and if you happen to get high cal on this weapon, then they likely won't hit all 3 crits on you, as they'll be shooting through a lot of flinch. Obviously, they have the peak shot advantage, but this weapon is a dueling all-star. Granted, all the footage you are seeing is from Iron Banner, and I was higher light than most, but I also used this weapon in comp in the first week, and it did very well. It does have limitations though. First off, you may be running a pulse, but treat it more like a 140 hand cannon with good range. My roll experiences range fall off at about 32 meters. I would get in duels sometimes with something like a messenger, and I was begging to lose that fight. The other thing with this gun is it seems to scare people. A lot of the time I would get people very low and they would sprint off to cover and I would leave them one shot. It happens. But if you're in that 20 to 30 meter range where a lot of hand cannons love to duel, you will come away victorious a lot. This gun also does not shoot well from the air, and it is not that great in hipfire either. I did outduel a sidearm once, but the guy was missing his shots. So there's definitely a playstyle around this weapon. I Am Cool Guy talks a lot about how certain weapons just fit you. I have loved using hand cannons since moving to PC, and I really found that with the Palindrome, Hawkmoon, and Ace of Spades, they just felt really good. But those guns are obviously top tier. But even then, I was not super consistent and confident with them. I would hit some clips and it would feel good, but in trials, could I clutch up when I need to? Not as often as I would like. However, with this gun, my confidence is through the roof. I was confident going into every engagement, and I think that is because it is just so stable and forgiving. With a 140, if you miss a shot completely, you drastically increase your TTK. They output big damage, but only if you land your shot. I found I could always land some damage with this weapon. I never really outright missed, and that also made it great for team engagements. I got a ton of assists with this because it has good range and ease of use. I could land part of a burst, and that was enough to finish the guy off. And it doesn't have nearly as severe of range fall off as a 140 RPM hand cannon. When you are out of range, your damage only goes down slightly. If you are at 40 meters, sure you aren't hitting max damage, but you are hitting for way more than a mid-range 140 RPM hand cannon would be at a similar distance. So I found I could shoot and help out on basically anyone. I will now show how this weapon handles with surplus versus no surplus, and on each element with elemental capacitor. I will also compare it to a Time War Inspire, Grid Skipper, and Horror's Least, so you can visually see why I am gushing about this weapon so much, and why I think surplus and elemental capacitor is the absolute PvP god roll and could be one of your favorite weapons to take into the Crucible like it is mine. So first we have a side-by-side comparison showing stasis versus no stasis strafe speed, and to be honest, the difference is extremely small, but it also does improve recoil direction as we'll try and demonstrate. Here you can see the extremely vertical recoil pattern, and this is without aim correction whatsoever, just laying on the trigger. So you can really see how much more stable this weapon is with all perks to trigger max surplus. This is basically a perfect recoil direction with counterbalance stock and stasis. Next, we'll show examples of the reload speed on Solar, handling on Arc, and stability on Void. This is just to reiterate how amazingly this weapon handles and shoots. So according to the data, Surplus adds 5 reload, 10 handling, and 5 stability for 1 ability up, 22 reload, 25 handling, and 15 stability for 2 abilities up, and 50 reload, 50 handling, and 25 stability with 3 abilities up. So unless you are out of all your abilities, which honestly doesn't happen that much, you will see some benefit from this perk. That means it has insanely high uptime, which is why it is so valuable. and those are massive stat increases. At base, the Darkest Before has 53 stability and 34 handling. So with all abilities, that is bumping your stability to 78 and handling to 84. That is massive on a rapid fire pulse. Like, I can't tell you how amazing it feels with max surplus, you just have to try it for yourself. And then when you look at Elemental Capacitor, it adds 45 to handling, so without any surplus, you are getting 79 handling if you are running Arc. And you will get plus 18 to stability if you run Void, so this takes its base stability to 71. That is without any barrel or mag options, and without surplus, which can add 25 to that. With Chambered Compensator and Ricochet rounds adding to stability and a stability masterwork, this weapon could have 98 stability without any stacks of surplus. On a rapid fire pulse, that is just nuts. At base, Horror's Lease and Grid Skipper have 54 and 52 stability respectively. Obviously, something like Grid Skipper could also get much higher stability, but nothing on this level. Doing the same Chambered Compensator and Stability Masterwork with Ricochet rounds combo, it hits 79 stability. So the stability on this roll is absolutely off the charts. This weapon can only drop from the final boss of the Prophecy Dungeon, so get out there and get farming. As I mentioned before, any surplus Elemental Capacitor combo will feel great, but you really want to shoot for high range and high caliber rounds. If you get that combo, you'll be very impressed with how it feels. And that is it for the video. This was my first weapon review, and I had a lot of fun making this video because I am just so hyped about this weapon. I hope my breakdown of the PvP God roll has you convinced to keep your eye out for this roll. And I also hope this video didn't drag on too long for you. There was so much I wanted to cover about this weapon, and I even left some stuff out. But I think I covered the main points, and I hope it was informative to you. If this video helped you out, then a like would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to see more Destiny content in the future, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any uploads. Now get out there and try and get you a God roll of this gun. It's just so damn good. Take care, Guardians.